My name's Mark Higgins, and my co-author is Daniel Lee, who you'll meet in a second. And we're going to talk about trusted provenance, so how you know what your data is. We're going to start just to get orientated with a bit of cake, because who does not like cake? So this was from a EUMETSAT cake making competition. We asked people to make cakes that were related to EUMETSAT satellites and data and products. And this was one of the winning cakes. This cake came from Laura. She described it as a galaxy cake, and you can see the rather magnificent structure of the inside plus the Jason satellite, Jason 3 satellite on top. Now, when the judges were actually judging the competition, what they noticed was that Laura gave quite a lot of information about how she created it. This is from her Instagram pages, and showed the steps involved in making her cake, as well as it being a thing of awesome and beauty. And of course, that takes us to what we actually want to deal with here, which is, if you have such a cake, you may have questions. We might want to know about the ingredients. Were they fair trade? Were they bio? What region did they come from? What recipe or even version of a recipe was using? And so these are kind of generic things about cakes in general. And for this particular cake, how was it created? What was the environment like it was created in? Temperature of the oven, stability of the temperature of the oven, temperature of the mixing environment. Was there a cold chain? So preserving the ingredients as they went into the cake, and how was the cake looked after the baking process? How was the cake stored? Who actually made this cake? How do we properly credit Laura for her awesome achievement here? And how was it transported? So these are some of the questions that we could ask about the cake. Now, in this particular cake, what we had to do was go back to Laura's Instagram feed, and there's a few questions and interactions there. So a couple of people actually asked Laura, how did you make the particular glaze, that very shiny glaze on the top of the cake? And she was able to answer questions. There isn't actually a link to the original recipe. There's a whole bunch of stuff here that we don't know about the cake. We could ask Laura, of course. We could go back to the cake provider and ask her, because she's super friendly and awesome. But what we don't know is a priori a way of getting all of this information super simply. So that takes us to data. So I'm going to hand over now to Daniel, who's going to get under the skin of how we do the same questions and a solution we've got and an invitation to you for data.
And like Mark said, I'll be talking about how to apply these types of approaches to not cakes, but to data products. And but I will be using this simile to make this example a little bit more approachable. So here I have a beautiful data product. It's almost as beautiful as Laura's cake, and it is a data product showing the sea surface temperature in the northern hemisphere. And like with Laura's cake, one might have a number of similar questions to ask about the process that went into making the sea surface temperature product, as well as the product itself. So this would be, if we stay within the recipe world, thinking about cakes, we might be asking about the ingredients. So for a data product, for this data product, it might be what was the input model data that was used, what observations were used, how were these observations calibrated, or different model levels calibrated in order to achieve the geophysical values that went into the processing. Were there climatologies used? Which ones? Were there neural networks involved? And then how was the product itself made? So what algorithm was used, and in particular, what version of that algorithm? So not only which ATPD would I need to read in order to understand how this was produced, but which version of that? And especially if we're working with machine learning and artificial intelligence, this might be a very important question indeed. About this particular data product, there are some other questions that might be asked going beyond the general production questions. And those would be, is this particular product that I'm holding in my hand still the same as the one that came out of the processor originally? So essentially, do I have a cold chain ensuring that the product has not been corrupted at any point along the many transfers and accesses that took place so that I could receive it? How was the data stored and retrieved? What software versions have touched it? Who is the author of this product? And who is the author of the products that were used in order to make this product? Where was it made? What was used to disseminate it? And this is kind of the tip of the iceberg. There are many, many additional questions that one might ask. Now, in operational environments, these are often questions for which there are answers. But like in the instance of LoRa, there is not a standardized way to access the answers to all of these questions. So it's not necessarily straightforward to get all of this information in one go. You'd have to maybe do several iterations with the data provider, and there would be a lot of archaeology involved in getting this data. And because of the high amount of manual work involved, it might not be possible to do this in real time. And that is why it would be nice if there was a machine readable way of attaching all of this information to a given data product and providing that to users such that they can always access it and use it to extend the chain of processing used to describe a product, or simply to find out that information. And the way that would look could be something like this. And this is an example actually that we've produced using the approach I'm going to tell you about today. So here we have a product, a CI's edge product that is stored somewhere, and we want that storage to be noted. And that stored product is the CI's edge product. And that CI's edge product was produced using inputs from EPS level 1 data. And all of this information in this example was actually pulled out of the product itself when it came out of an archive. So if you're getting a product out of an archive, you might want to know where was it stored, for how long, by whom, who funded it, what contributed to it on a scientific level, and what organizations contributed, so that I can do my due diligence when producing citations. And I'm showing this because it's a fairly simple example. 3 organizations contributing to the availability of one product, but it's still complex enough that you can see that you really actually profit from having this information. And this was in fact produced using the software that we're talking about today, the software and the approach to using that software. And that software is called Trusted Provenance. So Trusted Provenance is something that we developed with the intent of being able to answer all of the questions that we were discussing previously. And it was also required to address the concerns listed on this slide, namely that we produce records with those information and we can attach them easily to a data product without requiring significant changes to existing workflows. So it should be easy to use. It should not be incompatible with ground segments or processing segments. Those records should be easily interpretable using existing software. And this is for the reason that we don't want to force users to use our particular software. We want to use standardized interfaces and formats in order to describe the information. And what's also very important is that the link between the record defining the provenance, or where data came from, and the data itself should be able to be verified at any time. So say that you're a climate scientist, you've got a local archive containing lots of data from different organizations. And 20 years after those observations were made, you want to find out where did these observations actually come from? Which algorithm version was used to produce this? Which neural networks were used to get the values that I'm seeing here? You should be able to verify that many years later and more. And this resulted in a software that produced this diagram here. And this diagram here was produced during a validation campaign that we had with not only EUMETSAT, but also external users, where we were simulating using this in an operational chain involving the OZSAF and a Copernicus archive. So the use case is that you're a scientist coming to this archive and wanting to know who contributed to this data. And the feedback that we got back from users was very nice at the time. It was said to be easy to implement and configure, so it's not disruptive, to fit right into the operational chain that was being used. And my favorite quote that we got from users as a testimonial was, "This is the future." And I hope that that's the case, because I think that there are lots and lots of advantages to be had from having this level of provenance data available with data products, and to be able to trust that provenance data via verifiable links. And in order for it to become the future, of course, we need to gain experience with using this approach and the software in different contexts. We've tested it in operational contexts. We'd like to gain experience working in different scientific domains, and also in other sectors of the science business, so in research, for example. And that's why the Secretariat is seeking users that would help us gain experience with using this approach, using this software in real life, and identify what improvements we can make, what priorities do these improvements have, and to produce a working practice on implementing this in organizations. Because the implementation of providing this kind of data all the time goes well beyond simply putting a software on some systems. We need to do it in the right way that's compatible with how we do business. So if you're interested in participating in such an experience campaign, then we'd be very happy to get in touch with us by talking with us now, or by contacting our email at ops@eumetsat.int or any of the other channels that you can find on the website. Thank you very much, and hope to hear from you soon.